everybody. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. Come on in the room if you're on Facebook. I'm on my regular Facebook page. I am on the Leadership Unlocked page, and I'm also on my IG page, and my YouTube page. So, in my little jerry-rigged studio here. I'm Renita Alexander, the Leadership Locksmith. And this is Set It Up Sunday. This is my weekly discussion on how to set up your week, your month, your life for success in whatever way you define success. Of course, leading yourself is the foundation of leading anything and anyone. And it's all about leading yourself with intention. And again, that's what we talk about here in Set It Up Sunday, is leading yourself with intention, making sure that your actions are in alignment with your intention. So that's what we'll be talking about tonight. So actually, we're going to be talking about trauma tonight. So trauma is something I've been studying for about a year. Since last year. Last year, I did my very first masterclass, Unblock Your Barriers masterclass. And I was asked a question about how unacknowledged trauma might affect our ability to release any barriers. And I answered the question and actually went back and did a little research, answered the question again. But it really prompted me to do a little studying about how trauma really impacts our ability to be in the present moment. And so last week during Set It Up Sunday, I was talking about what I perceived as the intentionality of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson during her televised hearings as she is being vetted or interviewed as an associate justice on our United States Supreme Court. And I spoke about her composure, her comportment during those hearings, and what I took from that, not from anything that she actually she did speak to at least one of these aspects. But what I saw is a woman that was really anchored. So I talk about that. She was really anchored in her faith and family, which she did talk about. But I also took away from her this interview and how she responded is that she really was aware of any trauma or anything that might trigger her to respond or to react in a way that wasn't in alignment with her intention. So in the face of all the disrespect she received, she was able to, I felt like, choose actions that were in alignment with her intent. So that's what we're going to talk about. Trauma can wipe all of that out. So without your, all the intentions that you may have, trauma can wipe that out. And we saw that later on, that night, we saw that with Will Smith, Chris Rock, and The Slap. And so I was actually, after the live, I was sitting here doing some work, and I had turned the Oscars on and had looked up just in time to hear Chris Rock talking about the comments he made right before he made the joke that led to Will Smith responding the way he did. So I kind of saw it in real time, but of course there was the time delay. So there was some skipping forward. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I turned away from it and proceeded on with my night, and then went to social media, and all hell had broken loose, and everybody had something to say about what was going on. What I saw was trauma response. So I'm going to talk about that. If you're here live, just say, hey. I see a couple of people are on. If you're watching me live, just let me know you're here. Say, hey. If you were watching the Oscars, say that too. Let me know that you were watching the Oscars. So what I saw was a trauma response, and at least that was my interpretation of what was going on. And it's based on what I know about trauma, as well as what I have read and heard directly from Will Smith on his YouTube channel, what he's talked about. Primarily there, he did a whole series on YouTube, and as well as his book, Will, which I was gifted a copy of a few months ago, in which I read. I thought it was a really well written book, and he really explores his trauma that he experienced. He talks about it right up front. I mean, he says, he experienced trauma right up front. In fact, he says that much of what has driven him is the trauma of not being able to protect his mother from his father's abuse. In the book, he recounts watching his father punch his mother in the head so hard she collapsed. And he says that within everything I've done since then, the awards and accolades, the spotlight and the attention, the characters and the laughs, there has been a subtle string of apologies to my mother for my inaction that day. Now, mind you, the incident he's talking about, he was 9 years old. But even a man with that level of awareness, because that's, pretty aware, that's, a great level of awareness, of self-awareness, the recognition, as he says, that his very carefully crafted and honed characters were hiding this shame he had, this feeling of being a coward, that inner voice was telling him he was. Even a person with that level of awareness might be triggered by his trauma to silence that inner voice in a way that was inauthentic and unintentional. So I talked about intentionality on my Facebook, as well as my LinkedIn account. I did a post about intentionality, and how it's important that we align our actions with our intents. But then there's this whole trauma thing. So I want to talk about that as I kind of learn and kind of help us understand, how trauma can derail what it is that we're trying to do. So tonight, I'm just going to spend a little time on the basics, kind of describe what it is. So trauma comes from the Greek word for wounding. So trauma is a wound that is the result of something that has happened, often in childhood. As I mentioned, Will spoke about this particular incident, and he saw, abuse from his dad for a while, but what he spoke about was this particular incident that happened when he was 9 years old. And it's not really the event, the experience, the words, it's what happens inside of us as a result of what happens to us, or what happens around us, or what we see happening, right? In the case of psychological trauma, it's an experience that we might not even, really remember, like being abandoned by our parents. So Dr. Gabor Mate, who has written very extensively about this, shares the fact that he was abandoned by his mother when he was like 6 weeks old. Well, it was during World War II, and she, left him with other people for his own safety. And he doesn't even remember that, but he carries with him this sense of abandonment. And so he shared a story that, how that was triggered in the present, at 70 years old, right? He was 70, and there's something that happened in his childhood that triggered a sense of abandonment in him at the moment that he responded to. Now, he was aware, he's aware of his triggers and aware of his trauma, but he still was triggered by that trauma. Because when you think about it, it's like unhealed. It's like, when you think about unhealed trauma, it's like an open wound, right? So it's sensitive to the touch. It's sensitive to something that may happen that may activate that. And even though we may have developed some scar tissue over that wound, so that it's not necessarily feeling, we can't get to it, maybe it's hard to touch. Sometimes something happens that sort of gets underneath the scar tissue and causes us to respond. And the result of that trauma is, the primary result of the trauma is this sense of disconnection that we have from ourselves. So it's not a conscious disconnection. It's our magnificently complex beings, our bodies protecting us from pain that might be unbearable. And so we lose this disconnection. We lose the connection to who we are at our core, to our essence. And that fundamental trauma really is this loss of connection to ourselves, so to who we are. We also might disconnect from those adults in our lives who should have nurtured or protected us from whatever trauma we experience. So sometimes that is a disconnection also. So, what does trauma do? Well, I talk a lot about the fact that, how we experience what happens around us, our sense of reality is shaped by how we're socialized, our experiences. But trauma is an experience that also shapes our reality. In fact, it can distort what we perceive as real. It also affects our sense of safety, in that what we perceived as maybe, we thought we should have been safe, or we thought we should have felt safe, what we did not experience safety. And so that sense of safety is kind of, unbalanced, and that sometimes we don't recognize unsafe situations. We may not be able to recognize unsafe situations, or we may ascribe maybe exposure, vulnerability, or unsaid, that we're unsafe, when in fact we're not in any kind of danger at all. So it's really, we just kind of lose this sense of what is safe and what's not safe. It also impacts our relationships, right? And so, I mean, that absolutely, makes sense that it would impact, how we respond to other people around us, how we might respond to, uh-oh, lost my microphone here, my other microphone. It makes sense that it might, keep us from responding to people in the way that we want to, in the way that we intend, or, that we may be protective about, how we engage with other people because of the trauma that we have experienced. And the one of the primary things that it does is it gives us this shame based view of ourselves. And so we have this deep sense of shame for whatever reason that we couldn't do something maybe that we thought we should have, or we don't even maybe understand where it comes from. But I thought, going back to the Will Smith example, I thought it was very instructive that he talked about this feeling of being a coward. Well, that is a shame based feeling that he had as a child, that he developed as a child, as a result of the trauma that the events that he experienced, and the trauma that resulted from that. He developed this sense, or this idea that he was a coward, and that's a shame based view that was probably not true, because he should not have had to experience what he experienced as a child, and he certainly was not responsible for the events that happened. And so that's kind of the basics about trauma. In the next couple of weeks, during April, which is Stress Awareness Month, obviously trauma can be a source of stress in our lives. We're going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to talk a little bit more. Hope to have a pop up during the week just to discuss trauma. But one of the things that I've taken away from my research is that we can heal from trauma. We can heal from trauma, and I'm going to talk about ways to heal from trauma, and that is really, what we can. Trauma is not something that it teaches a lesson so much, and it's painful, and it's something that we need to heal from, but we can heal from it if we are willing to do some things. So let me see if there are any questions. If anybody has any questions about what I have spoken about tonight, if you have any questions, please just let me know if you have any. And if you don't, we're actually a little past time, because I started a little bit late. So we're past the time I usually like to end. But if I don't see any questions, I will let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening. So please come back next week and continue to be a part of this discussion on trauma. And if you'd like to join me right here on stage, I don't have a problem with that either. And we can have a discussion. So have a great rest of your Sunday evening. And I'll be right back here next Sunday for Set It Up Sunday.